What if the ground right outside your back door was quietly making you money every single month and you never even sent it an invoice? Welcome back to the Provident Acre. Today, we're walking through 7 simple ways our backyard pays for itself month after month without a single fancy gadget or a big investment. If you've ever wondered whether a homestead, even a small one, can actually put money back in your pocket, stay with us. By the end of this video, you'll have a clear picture of where that value is hiding and how to start collecting on it yourself. Ways number 1 through 3: the garden, the hens, and the herb bed. Let's start with the most obvious one, because it's the one most families already have some version of: the vegetable garden. Way number 1: the vegetable garden. A well-tended garden bed doesn't look like much on a receipt, but it shows up in the grocery total every week. A single tomato plant, cared for through a full season, can produce 15 to 20 pounds of fruit. Multiply that across a modest bed of tomatoes, peppers, squash, beans, and greens, and you're looking at hundreds of dollars in produce that never has to be purchased. The trick isn't growing everything, it's growing the right things. Focus on vegetables your family actually eats often and that are expensive to buy fresh. Leafy greens, tomatoes, peppers, and herbs tend to give the best return per square foot because they either produce continuously through the season or cost a premium at the store. A few practical tips here. Succession planting, putting in a new round of lettuce or beans every 2 to 3 weeks, keeps the harvest steady instead of one giant flush that outpaces what you can eat or preserve. Raised beds warm up earlier in spring, which stretches your growing season on both ends. And keeping a simple garden journal, even just a few notes on what thrived and what struggled, saves you from repeating the same mistakes next year. The real monthly savings show up once you start preserving the surplus, canning, freezing, or dehydrating extra tomatoes and beans so that August's abundance is still feeding you in January. That's when a garden stops being a summer hobby and starts being a year-round grocery discount. It also helps to think about the garden in terms of what it replaces, not just what it produces. A pound of organic salad greens at the store can run several dollars, and it wilts within days. A bed of loose-leaf lettuce, cut a few leaves at a time, keeps producing for weeks and costs almost nothing beyond a packet of seed and a bit of water. The same is true of herbs, mixed right into the vegetable rows, peppers that keep bearing through early fall, and zucchini, which has a well-earned reputation for producing more than any one family can eat. That kind of abundance is exactly what turns a garden into a grocery bill offset rather than a weekend hobby. Soil is worth a mention here too, since it's the one investment that keeps paying forward. A bed built up over a few seasons with compost and cover crops needs less watering, resists pests better, and produces more per square foot than a bed started from scratch each year. Families just getting into gardening often spend their first year or two improving soil more than harvesting from it, and that patience pays off in every season that follows, with less time spent troubleshooting and more time spent simply harvesting. Way number 2: backyard hens. If you keep even a small flock of laying hens, you already know eggs add up fast. 3 to 4 hens can comfortably produce 2 to 3 dozen eggs a week, which covers most families' needs without buying a single carton. The economics here are worth understanding. Feed costs are real, but a well-managed flock that free-ranges part of the day, eating bugs, kitchen scraps, and garden trimmings, needs less purchased feed than one kept in a closed run all day. That reduces the ongoing cost while keeping the eggs coming. A few tips for keeping this arrangement genuinely cost-effective. Choose dual-purpose or heritage breeds that lay reliably without requiring specialty feed. Rotate the flock through different parts of the yard using simple portable fencing, which lets them work on pest control and fertilize the soil as they go. And don't overlook the deep litter method in the coop. It composts bedding in place, cuts down on cleaning time, and produces rich material for the garden beds by spring. It's also worth thinking long-term about the flock itself. Hens lay most heavily in their first 2 to 3 years, so staggering when you bring in new chicks rather than starting an entire flock at once keeps egg production steadier across the years instead of dropping all at once. A simple rotation of a few new pullets every year or two smooths that curve out nicely. Housing matters more than people expect, too. A coop that's dry, well-ventilated, and predator-proof costs a little more time up front, but saves considerably on losses down the line. And losing birds to a fox or a raccoon is one of the fastest ways to erase months of savings in a single night. Simple hardware cloth buried a few inches into the ground around the run, solid latches, and a coop that closes securely at dusk go a long way toward protecting that investment. None of it needs to be elaborate. A modest, well-built coop that keeps birds safe and dry will outperform an expensive one that's been left with gaps in the fencing. Way number 3, the herb and medicinal bed. This one tends to get overlooked, but it adds up quickly. A small bed of culinary herbs, basil, thyme, rosemary, oregano, chives, replaces what would otherwise be a steady stream of small plastic packages at the grocery store, each priced far higher per ounce than almost anything else in the produce section. Herbs are also some of the most forgiving plants you can grow. Most thrive on neglect, tolerate poor soil, and can be grown in containers on a porch or windowsill if garden space is limited. A single rosemary bush, once established, can supply a family for years. A few tips to get the most from this bed. Perennial herbs like thyme, oregano, and chives come back year after year, so they're a one-time planting with an ongoing return. Drying and storing extra harvest in the late summer means you're covered through winter without buying dried herbs at premium prices. And if you're inclined towards simple home remedies, teas, salves, tinctures, a few additional plants like calendula, chamomile, or lemon balm extend that same bed into home wellness territory, another quiet category of spending that shrinks once you're growing your own. Placement matters more with herbs than most people assume. Many of the most useful culinary herbs, rosemary, thyme, oregano, sage, actually prefer poorer, drier soil and full sun, which makes them a natural fit for the edges of a garden bed or a strip along a walkway that might otherwise go unused. That means the herb bed doesn't have to compete with your vegetables for the best soil in the yard. It can quietly occupy the margins and still produce generously. Harvesting technique extends the return even further. Snipping herbs regularly rather than letting them flower and go to seed encourages bushier growth and a longer productive season. A pair of kitchen scissors kept near the back door, used a little at a time throughout the week, keeps the plants productive far longer than a single large harvest at the end of summer. Over a full year, that steady small batch harvesting is what actually adds up to real savings on the herb aisle. Between the garden, the hens, and the herb bed, we've already covered 3 ways your yard is offsetting real household costs every month. But there's more to this picture, including a couple of ways your yard can bring in actual income, not just savings. Let's get into those next. Ways number 4 and 5, fruit trees and berry bushes and the compost system. Way number 4, fruit trees and berry bushes. Unlike a vegetable garden, which asks for attention all season long, fruit trees and berry bushes are more of a long-term investment that pays dividends with relatively little ongoing work. A single mature apple or pear tree can produce anywhere from 1 to several hundred pounds of fruit a year once established. Berry bushes, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, bear heavily for years from a single planting and need only modest pruning and mulching to keep producing. the upfront cost is small compared to what you'd spend buying that same fruit at market price year after year, especially for anything organic or unsprayed. And because these plants are perennial, the second year onward is almost pure return. A few tips for making this work well. Choose varieties suited to your specific climate zone rather than whatever looks appealing at the garden center. A tree matched to your winters and summers will establish faster and bear more reliably. Planting 2 or more compatible varieties of the same fruit often improves pollination and yield, even for trees that are technically self-fertile. And mulching heavily around the base conserves moisture and cuts down on the watering and weeding that would otherwise eat into your time. Excess fruit doesn't have to go to waste either. Applesauce, jams, dried fruit, and fruit leather all extend the harvest well past the picking season, turning a few productive weeks into months of stocked pantry shelves. Patience is really the main ingredient with fruit trees, and it's worth setting honest expectations from the start. Most fruit trees take 3 to 5 years to bear a meaningful harvest, while berry bushes are often quicker, producing a modest crop by their second year and a full one by the third or fourth. That waiting period is exactly why it pays to plant a little earlier than feels necessary. The tree you plant this season is the one feeding your family 5 years from now, whether you plant it today or wait another year to get started. Pruning is another area where a small amount of yearly attention pays off disproportionately. An unpruned tree often puts its energy into height and leaf growth rather than fruit, and overcrowded branches can shade out the fruit lower down. A modest annual pruning, opening up the center of the tree to let in light and air, improves both yield and fruit quality without requiring specialized equipment beyond a good pair of loppers and a handsaw. And it's worth remembering that fruit trees do more than feed you directly. Established trees provide shade that can lower cooling costs in summer. Their blossoms support the same pollinators your vegetable garden depends on, and fallen leaves and prunings become valuable material for the compost pile we're about to talk about next. A well-placed fruit tree is quietly working on several fronts at once. Way number 5, the compost system. This one is easy to underestimate because it doesn't produce anything you eat directly, but it quietly reduces 2 separate costs at once: what you'd otherwise spend on fertilizer and soil amendments, and, in some areas, what you'd pay for yard waste or trash pickup. A basic compost system takes kitchen scraps, yard trimmings, and coop bedding and turns them into rich, dark soil amendment over the course of a few months. That finished compost replaces bagged fertilizer and topsoil, both of which have climbed steadily in price. For a family maintaining even a moderate garden, that can mean avoiding several bags of purchased soil amendment every season. A few practical tips here. Keeping a rough balance of greens, food scraps, fresh grass clippings, and browns, dry leaves, cardboard, straw, keeps the pile breaking down efficiently without turning smelly or slow. Turning the pile every couple of weeks speeds up the process considerably, and a simple 3-bin system, even built from scrap pallets, lets you have one pile finishing while another is actively cooking, so you always have compost on hand when planting season arrives. There's a quiet compounding effect of composting that's easy to miss. Healthier soil grows healthier plants with fewer pest and disease problems, which means less spent on soil amendments and treatments down the line. It's one of those homestead habits where the return keeps growing the longer you stick with it. It's also worth mentioning what shouldn't go into the pile, since a few common mistakes are what usually discourage new composters. Meat, dairy, and oily food scraps tend to attract pests and slow the whole system down, so those are best kept out and sent to the chickens instead if you keep them, or set aside entirely. Diseased plant material is another one to leave out, since a home compost pile rarely gets hot enough to fully break down plant pathogens, and you don't want to spread a problem back into next year's garden. Sticking to plain vegetable and fruit scraps, coffee grounds, eggshells, yard trimmings, and cardboard keeps the process simple and predictable. For families just getting started, even the smallest compost setup, a single bin tucked in a back corner, is enough to notice a difference within one season. There's no need to build all 3 bins at once or master every technique before beginning. The pile forgives a lot of imperfection, and a little bit of compost added to a garden bed each spring is still a meaningful step toward not buying it. As with most of these systems, consistency over time matters far more than getting it exactly right from day one. Together, the fruit and berry planting and the compost system round out 5 ways your yard is already working in your favor, but we've saved 2 of the most interesting ones for last, including one that can turn your yard from a cost saver into an actual source of income. Let's finish up. Ways number 6 and 7. Rainwater harvesting and selling the surplus. Way number 6. Rainwater harvesting. Water is one of those costs that's easy to overlook because it arrives quietly on a monthly bill rather than a checkout. But for a homestead with a garden, animals, and outdoor needs, water use adds up, and rainwater harvesting is one of the simplest ways to offset it. A basic setup, gutters directed into food-grade barrels or a larger cistern, can capture a surprising amount of water from even a modest roof. A single inch of rainfall on an average roof can yield hundreds of gallons, water that would otherwise simply run off into the yard or storm drain. A few tips for doing this well. Start with a simple first flush diverter, which sends the initial dirtiest runoff away from your storage barrels and keeps the collected water cleaner. Screen the tops of your barrels to keep out debris and discourage mosquitoes, and position barrels near where you'll actually use the water, close to garden beds or the coop, so gravity and short hose runs do the work instead of hauling buckets across the property. Collected rainwater is ideal for garden beds, flushing coop waters, and general outdoor cleaning, all of which reduces draw on treated household water. Over a full season, that can mean a noticeably lighter water bill, especially in drier months when irrigation needs climb. Plants actually tend to prefer rainwater over treated tap water, which is a nice bonus beyond the savings themselves. Municipal water is often treated with chlorine and can carry a higher mineral content, both of which build up in soil over time and affect certain sensitive plants. Rainwater is naturally soft and slightly acidic, closer to what most garden vegetables and berry bushes evolved with, so beds watered with harvested rain often show slightly better growth over a full season compared to those watered exclusively from the tap. Scaling up doesn't have to happen at once either. Many families start with a single repurposed barrel under one downspout, see how quickly it fills during a good rain, and expand from there. Connecting several barrels together with a simple overflow system lets one fill and spill into the next, multiplying your storage without needing a large cistern right away. And for anyone in a colder climate, it's worth remembering to drain and disconnect barrels before the first hard freeze, since cracked barrels are one of the more common and avoidable setbacks in a rainwater system. Way number 7. Selling the surplus. This last one is where the backyard shifts from simply saving money to actually generating it. Almost every homestead reaches a point where the garden, the flock, or the fruit trees produce more than one household can use. That surplus has value, and there are several low-effort ways to turn it into income. Extra eggs are often the easiest starting point. A small eggs for sale sign at the end of the driveway or a simple post in a local community group is usually enough to move a weekly surplus, often at a price that comfortably covers feed costs and then some. Garden surplus works the same way. Extra tomatoes, squash, peppers, and herbs can be sold at a small farm stand, a local farmer's market, or through neighborhood buy and sell groups. Seedlings started from your own seed in early spring are another option. Many gardeners would rather buy a few started plants than start an entire tray from seed themselves. A few tips for making this side of things work smoothly. Keep it simple and low overhead at first. A folding table and a cash box is plenty to start. Price based on what's genuinely fair for your area rather than undercutting local farmers, since building goodwill matters more long-term than a few extra dollars. And treat consistency as your biggest asset. Being known as the family who always has fresh eggs or extra produce on a certain day builds steady repeat customers over time. It's worth looking into your local rules before scaling this up much further, since regulations around selling eggs, produce, or home canned goods sometimes fall under different guidelines. A quick look into your local cottage food laws early on saves headaches later and lets you grow this side of things with confidence. There are a few other surplus categories worth keeping in mind as your systems mature. Extra seedlings started from saved seed, cut flowers if you grow any as a companion planting for pollinators, and even value-added goods like jams or dried herb blends can round out a small stand once the basics are established. None of these need to happen in year one. The goal at the start is simply to notice where you're already producing more than your household uses, and to treat that surplus as an asset, rather than letting it go to waste. What ties all of this together is that selling surplus rarely feels like a separate project. It grows naturally out of the other 6 habits on this list: a garden that's already producing well, a flock that's already laying reliably, and fruit trees that are already bearing more than one family needs. The selling is simply the last step in making sure nothing from that abundance goes to waste. None of these 7 ways require a large property or a big upfront investment. What they have in common is consistency, showing up to tend the garden, gather the eggs, turn the compost, and collect the rain week after week. Individually, each one might seem small. Together, they add up to a backyard that's quietly paying you back every single month. If this kind of practical, everyday homesteading is something you want more of, subscribe to the Provident Acre and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got more videos on building each of these systems in detail, and we'd love to have you along for the rest of the journey. Thanks for spending this time with us. We'll see you in the next one.